This chapter is chapter 8, and it is called Two Narrow Escapes. Everyone was cheerful as the Dawn Treader sailed from Dragon Island. They had fair winds as soon as they were out of the bay, and came early next morning to the unknown land, which some of them had seen when flying over the mountains while Eustace was still a dragon. It was low green islands inhabited by nothing but rabbits and a few goats, but from the ruins of stone huts and from blackened places where fires had been, they judged that it had been peopled not long before. There were also some bones and broken weapons. Pirates' work, said Caspian. Or the dragons, said Edmund. The other thing they found here was a little skin boat, or oracle, on the sands. It was made of hide, stretched over wicker framework. It was a tiny boat, barely 4 feet long, and the paddle which still lay in it was in proportion. They thought that either it had been made for a child or else the people of that country had been dwarfs. Reepicheep decided to keep it, and it was just the right size for him, so it was taken on board. They called that land Burnt Island and sailed away before noon. For some 5 days they ran before a south-southwest wind, out of sight of all lands and seeing neither fish nor gull. Then they had a day that rained hard till the afternoon. Eustace lost 2 games of chess to Reepicheep and began to get like his old and disagreeable self again, and Edmund said he wished they could have gone to America with Susan. Then Lucy looked out of the stern windows and said, "Hello, I do believe it's stopping. And what's that?" They all stumbled up to the poop at this and found that the rain had stopped and that Drinian, who was on watch, was also staring hard at something astern, or rather at several things. They looked like smooth, rounded rocks, a whole line of them, with intervals of about 40 feet in between. "But those can't be rocks," Drinian was saying, "because they weren't there 5 minutes ago." "And one's just disappeared," said Lucy. "Yes, and there's another one coming up," said Edmund. "And nearer," said Eustace. "Hang it," said Caspian. "The whole thing is moving this way." "And moving a great deal quicker than we can sail, sire," said Drinian. "It'll be up with us in a minute." They all held their breath, for it is not at all nice to be pursued by an unknown something either on land or sea, but what turned out to be far worse than anyone had suspected. Suddenly, only about the length of a cricket pitch from the port side, an appalling head reared itself out of the sea. It was all greens and vermilions with purple blotches, except where shellfish clung to it, and shaped rather like a horse, though without ears. It had enormous eyes made for staring through the dark depths of the ocean, and a gaping mouth filled with the double row of sharp fish-like teeth. It came up on what they first took to be a huge neck, but as more and more of it emerged, everyone knew that this was not its neck, but its body. And that at last they were seeing what so many people had foolishly wanted to see, the great sea serpent. The folds of its gigantic tail could be seen far away, rising at intervals with the surface, and now its head was towering up higher than the mast. Every man rushed to his weapon, but there was nothing to be done. The monster was out of reach. "Shoot, shoot," cried the master bowman, and several obeyed. But the arrow glanced off the sea serpent's hide as if it was iron-plated. Then, for a dreadful minute, everyone was still, staring up at its eyes and mouth and wondering where it would pounce. But it did not pounce. It shot its head forward across the ship on a level with the yard of the mast. Now its head was just beside the fighting top. Still it stretched and stretched till its head was over the starboard bulwark. Then down it began to come, not only into the crowded deck, but into the water, so that the whole ship was under an arch of serpent. And almost at once that arch began to get smaller. Indeed, on the starboard, the sea serpent was now almost touching the Dawn Treader's side. Eustace, who had really been trying very hard to behave well till the rain and the chest put him back, now did the first brave thing he had ever done. He was wearing the sword that Caspian had lent him. As soon as the serpent's body was near enough to the starboard side, He jumped onto the bulwark and began hacking at it with all his might. It is true that he accomplished nothing beyond breaking Caspian's second-best sword into bits, but it was a fine thing for a beginner to have done. Others would have joined him if, at that moment, Reepicheep had not called out, "Don't fight, push!" It was so unusual for the mouse to advise not to fight that even in that terrible moment, every eye turned to him. And when he jumped up onto the bulwark forward of the snake and set his little furry back against the huge, scaly, slimy back and began pushing as hard as he could, quite a number of people saw what he meant and rushed to both sides of the ship to do the same. And when, a moment later, the sea serpent's head appeared again, this time on the port side, and this time with its back to them, then everyone understood. The brute had made a loop of itself around the Dawn Treader and was beginning to draw the loop tight. When it got quite tight, snap, there would be floating matchwood where the ship had been, and it would pick them out of the water one by one. Their only chance was to push the loop backward till it slid over the stern, or else, to put the same thing another way, to push the ship forward out of the loop. Reepicheep alone had, of course, no more chance of doing this than of lifting up a cathedral, but he had nearly killed himself with trying before others shoved him aside. Very soon, the whole ship's company, except Lucy and the mouse, which was fainting, was in two long lines along two bulwarks, each man's chest to the back of the man in the front, so that the weight of the whole line was in the last man, pushing for their lives. For a few sickening seconds, which seemed like hours, nothing appeared to happen. Joints cracked, sweat dropped, breath came in grunts and gasps. Then they felt that the ship was moving. They saw that the snake loop was further from the mast than it had been, but they also saw it was smaller, and now the real danger was at hand. Could they get it over the poop, or was it already too tight? Yes, it would just fit. It was resting on the poop rails. A dozen or more sprang up on the poop. This was far better. The sea serpent's body was so low now that they could make a line across the poop and push side by side. Hope rose high till everyone remembered that the high carved stern, the dragon tail of the Dawn Treader, it would be quite impossible to get the brute over that. "An axe," said Caspian hoarsely, "and still shove." Lucy, who knew where everything was, heard him when she was standing on the main deck staring up at the poop. In a few seconds she had been below, got the axe, and was rushing up the ladder to the poop. But just as she reached the top, where it came crashing noise like a tree coming down from the ship, rocked darted forward. For at that very moment, whether because of the sea serpent was being pushed so hard, or because it foolishly decided to draw the noose tight, the whole of the carved stern broke off and the ship was free. The others were too exhausted to see what Lucy saw. There, a few yards behind them, the loop of the sea serpent's body got rapidly smaller and disappeared into a splash. Lucy always said, but of course she was very excited at the moment, and it had been only imagination, that she saw the look of idiotic satisfaction on the creature's face. What is certain is that it was a very stupid animal. For instance, for instead of pursuing the ship, it turned its head round and began nosing all along its own body, as if expected to find the wreckage of the Dawn Treader there. But the Dawn Treader was already well away, running before a fresh breeze, and the men lay and sat panting and groaning all about the deck, till presently they were able to talk about it, and then to laugh about it, and then, when some rum had been served out, they had raised a cheer, and everyone praised the valor of Eustace, though it hadn't done any good, and of Reepicheep. After this, they sailed for 3 days more and saw nothing but sea and sky. On the 4th day, the wind changed to the north and the seas began to rise, for in the afternoon it had nearly become a gale. But at the same time, they sighted a land on the port bow. "By your leave, sire," said Drinian, "we will try to get under the lee of that country by rowing and lie in harbor, maybe till this is all over." Caspian agreed, but a long row against the gale did not bring them to the land before evening. But the last light of that day they steered into a natural harbor, anchored, but no one went ashore that night. In the morning they found themselves in a green bay of rugged, lonely-looking country, which sloped up to a rocky summit. From the wind north beyond that summit, clouds came streaming rapidly. They lowered the boat and loaded her with any of the water casks which were now empty. Which stream shall we get water at, Drinian? Said Caspian as he took his seat in the stern sheets of the boat. There seem to be two coming down into the bay. It makes little odds, sire, said Drinian, but I think it's shorter pull to that on the starboard, the eastern one. Here comes the rain, said Lucy. I should think it does, said Edmund, for it was already pelting hard. I say, let's go out to the other stream. There are trees there, and we'll have some shelter. Yes, let's, said Eustace. No point in getting wetter than we need. But all the time Drinian was steadily steering to the starboard like tiresome people in cars who continue at 40 miles an hour while you are explaining to them that they are on the wrong road. They're right, Drinian, said Caspian. Why don't you bring her head round and make for the western stream? As your majesty pleases, said Drinian a little shortly. He had had an anxious day with the weather yesterday, and he didn't like advice from landsmen. But he altered course, and it turned out afterward that it was a good thing he did. By the time they had finished watering, the rain was over, and Caspian with Eustace and the Pevensies and Reepicheep decided to walk up to the top of the hill, and see what could be seen. It was a stiffish climb, through coarse grass and heather, and they saw neither man nor beast, except seagulls. When they reached the top, they saw that it was a very small island, not more than 20 acres, and that from this height the sea looked larger and more desolate than it did from the deck or even the fighting top of the Dawn Treader. Pretty sure you are asleep, but we are on chapter 130. And then next chapter, we'll finish chapter 9. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 more pages. Very exciting. And then we'll be on chapter 9, the Island of the Voices. So that must be where we're at right now. Very interesting.